Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
We have systems which are not sustainable. The internal combustion engine is not sustainable.
Green sectors. We're talking about changing the whole economy.
We will see an unprecedented growth in green technology use and innovation, which will result in historic business and investment opportunities for governments, institutions, entrepreneurs, and companies.
Welcome to Land Defense, a program produced by Cultural Survival, your advocacy ally in Indigenous people's rights and land defense. Today's program will be on Indigenous rights in the transition to the green economy. My name is Avexnim Cojti, and I will take you with us in our trip to Brussels this past March 2022, where our Executive Director, Galina Angarova, our partner, Dmitry, Berezhkov, and myself met with members of the European Parliament, partner organizations, and Indigenous and local communities activists that protect Mother Earth, human rights, and collective rights of Indigenous peoples. Our goal was to contribute to the conversation on the new battery regulation and the proposed due diligence law that would affect the value chain of battery consumption in the European Union and its production around the world. Our Executive Director, Galina Angarova, Buryat from Siberia, and member of the European Parliament, Malte, Gallée, give us background information on the increasing dependency on minerals supporting a growing electric battery industry.
It's not a secret that transition minerals such as nickel, lithium, cobalt, and copper play a critical role in the development of a so-called green, low-carbon economy. There is a growing dependence on battery technology, especially for electric vehicles, and requires a much higher supply of transition minerals. Demand for these minerals is really skyrocketing as electric vehicles companies are striving to put fleets of electric vehicles on the streets of developed countries.
It was a pleasure to meet Malte Gallée. He received us with open arms in his office in Brussels this past March. While he shares how large his constituency is, he talks about the dependence on important minerals for batteries.
First of all, thank you for visiting. I think this is really, really important to spread the word and to show the cases that you're working on, because I think it's really important for our politics. My name is Malte Gallée. I'm from a super small village in Germany with 28 inhabitants. It's in southern Germany.
I'm sorry, did you say 28,000?
No, 28 inhabitants. Yeah, so well, now only 27, of course, because I left. But it's between Munich and Stuttgart. I am a member of the European Parliament for the Greens, for the German Greens, and I'm a member of the Greens EFA group in the European Parliament. And I was elected on the list to represent young people, but also to fight for global justice and a way of production and circularity that doesn't harm our planet, I would say. Well, there were many topics that I was elected for, but these are those who I would point out. Our transition towards renewable energies and towards not using fossil fuels anymore, we will need much more batteries, and this is just an essential technology for a green revolution, I would say. Every electronic, or nearly every electronic device nowadays has a battery, or at least the mobile devices, they for sure all do have batteries. All these minerals and all these metals that are used in the battery technology, they are imported, or most of them are imported. First of all, of course, because it's cheaper, It's cheaper to mine somewhere where nobody or where police doesn't care if you poison your environment. This is of course cheaper. This is why we import the minerals for our batteries. We produce them either or they are produced either in China or even in Europe. But the minerals, we import them, and then at the end of life, we just throw them away, basically.
So the reason why we crossed the ocean to be in Brussels was to bring to the attention of politicians and other organizations how indigenous communities are being affected and impacted by mining of transitional minerals to the green economy.
Increased mining for these resources threatens indigenous rights, our lands and territories. We know that the latest research has shown that indigenous territories contain the highest remaining concentrations of these metals around the world. Therefore, a just transition to a low-carbon economy will require governments and companies involved in this new green economy to observe and implement rights enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, including the right to free, prior, and informed consent, which is one of the main rights, both substantive and provisional rights for indigenous peoples.
Dmitry Berezhkov was part of our cultural survival delegation to Brussels. Okay, hi Dmitry. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm fine, yes. It's a good day here in Brussels, warm and sunny.
Excellent. So we are here at one of the offices of the European Parliament, and I'm taking this opportunity to interview you about your work, about the situation of your community. Can you please introduce yourself and also your community, your indigenous community?
Yeah, my name is Dmitry. I'm originally from Kamchatka Peninsula. It's a big piece of land in the Pacific Ocean, in the Russian forest, between Alaska and Japan, for understanding. And I belong to Itelmen people. It's a rather small nation. Only 2,000 people we have there in Kamchatka. And we are salmon-eating, salmon-catching people. In general, we belong to a network of indigenous peoples from different regions of Russian Federation, from Arctic, Siberia and Far East, and we have activists and community leaders who are involved in this network. Of course, there are difficult situations in other regions. In some regions, mining company occupies traditional lands and transfer it in a moonscape, so there is nothing at all after this mining, like coal mine in Kemerovo region or nickel mine in platinum mining in Taimyr Peninsula. It's one of the dirtiest regions of the world. Anything is dead, water is dead, forest is dead, and the flames of processing facilities goes around for hundreds kilometers, and indigenous peoples have to go more and more into the forest, into the taiga, into the Arctic, go out of these poisoned lands. The biggest problem for us, if we consider the mining companies, is that they don't hear at all the voice of indigenous peoples. They organize the fake public hearings when they organize a new processing plant or new mining. They invited for these public hearings bureaucrats or even mining workers who voted for a new mine in this area. And indigenous peoples who live in this area, they don't invite them and don't hear this voice.
Do you have criminalization of land defenders in indigenous communities?
Yes, unfortunately, we have these processes now, and it's going more and more. Right now, we have several cases. For example, in Khanty-Mansiysk, we have a sacred lake, Imlor, and they are circled around by oil companies, and the only person who continued to live there, this is a very old person. His name is Sergei Kichimov, and he is against this oil exploration on this sacred land, and indigenous peoples around call him as a shaman. Shaman, according to our language, is a person who is sacred, who continues sacred practice according to ancestral traditions. And he tried to protect this lake from. This is a sacred lake for indigenous peoples, and he tried to protect this lake from oil company. But now oil company, when he came to his land, he already was criminalized once. He was charged by court, but now they open again a new case against him. The oil workers come to his camp, and he start to shout on them, "Go back, go out from my land." They beaten him, and after that they wrote a paper to police. And now police open a criminal case against him because the police said, "You frightened oil workers and frightened them to kill them." That's why they open a case against him. So, and such cases go around Russia now more and more.
Understanding how indigenous peoples' territories are target of mining, and especially now with transitional mining, and learning how indigenous communities have been on the margins and that their voices are not being heard, it was important for us to deliver urgent messages to parliamentarians about the direct impacts of transitional minerals mining on indigenous communities and the urgency for mining companies to be responsible. The European Union is one of the largest markets in the world, with over 700 million consumers, and much of what is happening in the European Union is going to dictate how the raw materials for batteries are going to be sourced, processed, and traded globally. It was important for us to deliver the urgent message to parliamentarians of the direct impacts of transitional minerals mining on indigenous communities and the urgency for mining companies to be responsible. The European Union Battery Regulation and the proposed horizontal due diligence law are two pieces of legislation that are groundbreaking in the sense that they aim to provide mechanisms for accountability, transparency, and human rights commitment and environmental protection throughout global value chains. Let's hear from Member of Parliament Malte Gallée about what the battery regulation is, how it started, and who was part of this project at the European Parliament.
Well, we are at a point in history, I would say, where we realized, okay, we destroy our planet in a way that is not sustainable. The whole battery regulation is under the star of the European Green Deal. The European Green Deal is like the big program how we want to clean up our continent, how we want to make it climate protecting and carbon neutral and everything. And so under this momentum, the battery regulation was set in place, basically. The rapporteur is Simona Bonafè from Italy. I'm the green shadow rapporteur for the battery regulation. So from every party there's one shadow, basically. The battery regulation, or the due diligence in the battery regulation, makes sure that companies who produces batteries, that they comply and that they do not violate human rights, or that they do not destroy nature and so on. For the very first time, it covers the whole value chain of a battery and the whole life cycle.
When Malte mentions the value chain versus the supply chain, it is important to note the difference. Supply chain refers to all the steps required to get the product to the consumer, and value chain includes raw materials and the value added to them to produce products that are eventually sold to consumers. Circling back to Malte, he continues explaining part of the environmental regulation for batteries' value chains.
We really go towards the direction of producing clean batteries. We'll favor the mining that does not emit as much CO2.
I asked Malte how would an organization or an institution track all this information about the good and bad practices of the company or sub-companies in the value chain. This is what he responded.
We introduce a digital passport for batteries, which means we create like a online space somehow, like a digital certificate where all the information about the batteries are in. We hope that we get it to that point, but you will be able to track where the sources are coming from. So from which mine is the copper coming, from which mine is the cobalt coming, from which mine is the lithium coming, and so on. And this is also a way how I think we can really draw attention to the mining, because if people see, okay, I can look up where this battery or where the resources came from, this is how they really will engage, and then they will go on Google Maps, and then they see these huge holes, and then they will be, is this also environmentally friendly? And then companies will focus on production that is not destroying nature, I think. Basically, it's only about creating a level playing field so that the same rules apply for everybody. You know, if we don't want environmental destruction like here in our backyard, we also don't want it somewhere else. And so we should put up rules that really lead to this point. And so, I think that this battery regulation can really become a blueprint for other sectors, but also for other continents and other countries to really put in rules that protect environment and people and lead to clean production and a sustainable and responsible use of resources. And I'm really looking forward to work on this further.
One of the consequences for companies that do not comply with this regulation will be not being able to sell in the European market. The question that came to my mind was if there was a responsible entity or institutions where communities could go to inform about the violation of human rights or environmental damages.
People who in some way are negatively affected by a company, that they can complain basically, and that they get compensated and everything. And this is basically what I think how we really push industry towards respecting human environmental rights.
It was a while ago that I had not heard about a proactive policy that would affect the mining industry around the world. Through the value chain regulation, there is an alternative to have more responsible mining. Our visit in Brussels aimed at sharing the impact of transitional minerals in indigenous territories when meeting with members of the European Parliament, and we also advocated to include indigenous peoples' human and collective rights in the regulation. When governments and industries respect the rights of indigenous peoples, they are also supporting the sustainability of natural resources and our ecosystems. The European Parliament voted on their position on the draft text of the new battery regulation on March 10, 2022. The improved text that was agreed upon includes references to the rights of indigenous peoples and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in Recital 67. This is a major success for our people's rights. Cultural Survival's Executive Director explained how our work with other partners to have the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, including free, prior and informed consent, was successfully included in the battery regulation.
Our intention as an organization, as a movement, as a coalition of indigenous-led and allied organizations is strategically engage with companies, investors, with governments, elected representatives from different governments to inform how mining for transition minerals is already impacting indigenous communities globally. And it's not just in one country or two countries, it's happening everywhere, including the United States, including Russia, Philippines, Democratic Republic of Congo, Chile, Argentina, you name it. And I think the list will go on. Thanks to our advocacy our partners here in Brussels were able to include references to indigenous peoples and the free, prior, informed consent in the text of this regulation. If a company is going to engage with indigenous peoples, they do find transition mineral deposits on their territories, that they have to adhere to the UN Declaration, they have to protect our rights, they have to secure our consent or not secure our consent. This regulation will also require transparency in their value chains and supply chains, and not only transparency, but accountability. And I think that's the most important achievements and asks from the European Parliament.
So what's happening for next steps? The two bodies, that means the European Parliament and the European Council, will meet with the European Commission to have an interinstitutional negotiation called trialogue. The trialogue period will be happening in mid-April to summertime this year, 2022. We will continue to advocate before the trialogue so that the text adopted as a result of negotiations among the European Parliament, European Council, and European Commission is not watered down, and that references to the rights of indigenous peoples and the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples are kept. This is the end of our program, and we would like to express our gratitude to our partners in Brussels, the European Environmental Bureau, and Katapa for organizing the meetings and providing ongoing support on the ground, and Transport Environment for joint advocacy and supporting our cause of indigenous rights over our lands and territories. Thanks for tuning in Land Defense, and hope you enjoy this program. Until next time.
Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.